glass clinked softly as I poured what I thought was her drink into the crystal goblet. But she wrinkled her nose and scoffed. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp as broken glass. "I asked for a drink, not water." The room fell silent. My hands froze mid-air, the amber liquid trembling in the bottle. My son looked down at his plate. No one said a word. She thought I was the waiter. In my own house. At 72, I'd thought I'd seen enough of life to stop being surprised by cruelty. But that evening, her words cut deeper than any I'd ever heard. I'm James Miller, retired builder, widower, and father of one. This house, the one we sat in that night, wasn't just a home. It was my life's work. I laid every brick, every beam, every nail myself back in the 80s, when my hands were still strong, and my wife, Linda, stood beside me with a smile that could light a room. Now, all that's left of her are the photographs on the mantel, and the silence. When Linda passed 3 years ago, I thought I'd never hear laughter in these rooms again. My son, David, suggested I let him and his new wife, Claire, move in to keep me company. In truth, I kept them. I paid the bills, cooked the meals, and fixed what broke. But slowly, I realized I was no longer the homeowner. I was the help. That night, the insult wasn't new, just the last straw. Claire sat at the table in her expensive dress, twirling her fork like she was hosting royalty. Every sentence she spoke started with, "my house," or "my kitchen." I'd ignored it for months, thinking peace was worth my pride. But when she looked at me, snapped her fingers, and said, "Waiter, more napkins, please," I felt something in me harden. I smiled, as calmly as I could. "Of course, ma'am," I said, and brought her the napkins. Inside, though, I made a promise. She was going to learn whose house she was sitting in. Later that night, when they'd gone upstairs, I stayed back to clear the table. The drink bottle was still half full, its label faded. The same kind Linda and I used to share every anniversary. I poured myself a small glass, sat down at the head of the table, and whispered to her portrait on the wall. "Linda, you always said I was too patient. Maybe it's time to prove you wrong." The next morning, I went to my study and opened the drawer that held the truth. A folder with all the property deeds and bank records. Every inch of that house still belonged to me, not to David, and certainly not to Claire. At breakfast, she appeared again, perfectly dressed, perfectly rude. "Good morning," I greeted, setting the coffee on the table. "Just black for me," she said without looking up from her phone. "No sugar. And please, make it strong. I barely slept." Her tone dripped with entitlement. I sat down across from her and slid the folder toward her. "Claire," I said, smiling, "since you call me the waiter, I figured I should serve you something you'll find interesting." She glanced at it, confused. "What's this? Another one of your old man stories?" "Not quite." I opened it for her. "That's the property deed. Notice the signature?" Her eyes flickered across the page, then froze. "James Miller," she read slowly. "Wait, this can't be right." "Oh, it's very right," I said softly. "You see, when my son told you he bought this house after your wedding, he forgot to mention who he bought it from. Or rather, who let him live here rent-free." Her face drained of color. David looked stunned. "Dad, you never told her." "I didn't have to," I interrupted. Respect shouldn't require reminders. That silence at the table. That was the sound of truth landing. "I think it's time you two found your own place," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "You can't be serious," Claire snapped. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked her dead in the eye. "A waiter's not supposed to decide where the guests go. I'm just here to serve. And you, my dear, have overstayed your welcome." David looked torn, but he didn't defend her this time. Maybe he finally saw what I'd been seeing all along. The next few weeks were peaceful. Too peaceful, maybe. They packed in silence, avoiding me as if I were a ghost. I spent that time restoring little things around the house. Linda's roses in the garden, the squeaky step she always complained about, the porch light she loved. On the day they left, Claire refused to say goodbye. She walked past me, chin high, but I could see the embarrassment in her eyes. David paused at the door, tears threatening. "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have stopped her that night." I nodded. "I know, son. You're still my boy, but some lessons come the hard way." A month later, he called me. His voice was softer, humbled. "Dad, we're renting a small apartment now. Claire's working again. We miss you." I smiled, feeling Linda's spirit in the quiet of the living room. "I miss you too, son," I said. "Come by for dinner sometime. But next time, tell your wife." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm not the waiter." That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I poured myself another glass of my favorite drink. Real drink, not water. I raised it toward the portrait of Linda above the fireplace and whispered, "To dignity. 2 lessons. To home." And as the firelight flickered across her smiling face, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Because respect, I realized, isn't something you demand. It's something you own.